that welcome to you all here. Thank you for being here in what is a little bit the graveyard shift at 7 p.m. So we're encouraged to see this audience with us and this participation. And I'm sure I can speak on behalf of the panelists to say that we welcome interaction and questions with you all a little later on. So it's my pleasure to be here. I'm thankful for the invitation to moderate this session and to be introduced to these creatives and their works. I've been learning a lot about their works, the themes that they are engaging with. And this panel session, in no light manner, is called Writing to Save the Planet. So it feels a little apocalyptic, and that is one of the themes that we may be touching on in our conversation this evening. So I'd like to begin by turning to our panelists. I'd like to begin by thinking about activism for saving the planet and the medium of writing or creative expression, screenwriting, filmmaking, the literary arts, and how maybe personally, individually, as creatives, you address this in your work, and to what extent this may be important to you. So we're thinking really about the literary form or the literary arts as a vehicle to, as this panel is entitled, to motivate to save the planet. Okay, Shrudeep, would you like to begin with your response?
Good evening. Difficult to compete with this. It's difficult to compete with the symbols at the back, but we'll give it a go. I don't know whether it's called noise pollution or it's part of the. Climate change pollution. This is. But thank you all for coming. It is a very, very long day. We are also quite tired. That's one level. But so, to tell you honestly, this book, which just came out last year, called Anthropocene, has a subtitle called Climate Change, Contagion and Consolation. The first half of the book obviously talks about climate change and the effects of the pandemic. Pandemic to me is really a subset of the larger idea of climate change. And the second half of the book is consolation, because I firmly believe as a human being, personally, it's my personal view that if we don't worship light, we will never be, it's never possible to go through a day. So if you're always dark and gloomy and do not have at the end of our tunnel, so to speak, light, it's impossible to wake up, really. So the second half of the book is about light, lightness of being, light, yearning for light, light as a positive force and so on.
And the collection is very hopeful in that respect.
Yes, I mean, that's the whole idea, because, during the pandemic, I lost 12 people to COVID. And it was just death and destruction all around. I live in Delhi, and after the second wave, and some of you have heard this before because very, very diligently, there's a core set of people who've come back to hear me again. After the second wave, Delhi didn't have enough space to burn the dead. So car parks, sidewalks were turned into crematorium grounds. And it's a horrific sight to see, just as a visual spectacle.
Right.
Of course, I know the history of India, the partition and so on, the carnage that took place at the time. But I'm privileged to have been born in independent India, and I've not ever seen something like this. I've only read that through novels and movies and stories my grandparents have told me. So to see all that, you don't have a choice if you're a sensitive artist, but not to respond.
So-
In fact,
so-
one of the filmmakers I quote in the introduction,
Yeah.
an artist's role is not to look away.
Yeah.
I don't take it as a sort of personal vision that I'm going to change the world or anything, but it's my own modest way of coping in a way,
Right.
just as an individual. And hopefully that coping will help two more people, and then the two more people then become a community. There's no way an individual can save the planet. There's no way.
So this leads me to ask you then, Shrudeep, did you have this book in mind like before the pandemic, or was the pandemic a real catalyst for you to put this collection of poetry together?
You know, I have to say, this book did not exist in me at all. I was working on another book called The Whispering Anklet, which is on classical Indian music and dance. I'm obsessed with classical dance and music. So that's been a long-term project of mine, which is what I was working on. But everything went to a halt. And it's a very odd thing to say because it's ironic almost, and I feel guilty saying it, but this book has been a gift of the pandemic to me. It shouldn't be a gift, but the circumstances made me write it and respond to it. Perhaps I should maybe just read to demonstrate.
Yes. Would you like to choose one of the poems to read, and then we'll move to the other panelists.
Tough to read poetry with this on the back, but I'll give it a go. This is set in Delhi. It's called Disembodied. And it's a poem, of course, responding to the surroundings, the climate change and everything else, the pollution. Even though it's set in Delhi, when one travels around the world, it could be easily London or Brasilia or Tokyo or any other country. It's called Disembodied, very appropriately, because at the moment I feel like a disembodied poet trying to make sense with what's happening at the back. Disembodied. My body carved from abandoned bricks of a ruined temple, from minaret shards of an old mosque, from slate remnants of a medieval church apse, from soil tilled by my ancestors. My bones don't fit together correctly as they should. The searing ultraviolet light from Aurora Borealis patches and etch corrects my orientation. Magnetic pulses prove potent. My flesh, sculpted from the fruits of the tropics, blood from coconut water, skin colored by brown bark of Indian teak. My lungs fueled by Delhi's insidious toxic air, echo asthmatic sounds, a new vinyl dub remix. Our universe where radiation germinates from human follies, where contamination persists from mistrust, where pleasures of sex are merely a sport, where everything is ambition, everything is desire, everything is nothing, nothing and everything. White light everywhere, but no one can recognize its hue. No one knows that there is color in it, all possible colors. Body worshipped not for its blessing, but its contour. Artificial shape shaped by Nautilus, skin moistened by L'Oreal and not by the season's first rains, skeleton strength not shaped by earthquakes or slow molded by fearless forest fires. Ice caps are rapidly melting, too fast to arrest glacial slide. In the near future, there will be no water left, or too much water that is undrinkable, excess water that will drown us all. Disembodied floats, afloat like Noah's Ark. No GPS, no pole star navigation, no fossil fuel to burn away. just maps with empty grids and names of places that might exist. Already, there's too much traffic on the road. Unpeopled hollow metal shells without brakes swerve about, directionless, looking for an elusive compass.
Thank you. Thank you. Achil, if I can maybe put the same question or comment to you about your own work, if you might just share with us a little bit about your work and how you see that in relation to a kind of literary arts activism when it comes to saving the planet.
So I think it's something very necessary for myself, personal, very important. First of all, I am coming from the country where, unfortunately, environment is not in the best condition, and it's never became priority, non-social and non-governmental, neither governmental.
And
So-
for those people who don't know, you're based in Tbilisi in Georgia.
I'm based in Tbilisi, but very often I'm outdoors because from very young age I'm in nature and I'm guide as well. So, and not only in writings, as a social activist, I start a petition against the building huge highway through the Caucasus Mountain, which should make tourists to get there easier. But it was absolutely damaging everything. Meanwhile, we succeed to spoil relationship with donors. So they were asking for World Bank and some European banks money, and we succeed. Meanwhile, we succeed. But for me, as for writer, environment is something very important. Sometimes environment is inspiration for me to start writing story or novel. The place is main inspiration. And after I settle this place with some people or creatures, and I give you, as a naturalist, I'm not zoologist, I'm not botanist, but I always tried to be with those people because it was always very interesting for me. And once my zoologist friend invited me to show me something in his institution, and what he shows me, it was glass box with lizards, and he asked me, have you seen such a lizard in our country? I answered, no. These are Lebanon lizards, he said. They are found only in Lebanon and that area. And he found them at the Black Sea coast in old fortress with very such a sad history. It was place to smuggle slaves from Turkey to Ottoman Turkey in late Middle Ages. And it's most of such a dark period of our history. Then Georgian nobles from West Georgia also were involved in this smuggling, and they were selling people. And so this population of these lizards came in with Ottoman boats, which were built from famous Lebanon trees. I don't know, cedar, I think. Cedar is
Cedar, the
yes.
cedar tree, right.
So, and imagine that from 17th century, tiny population of lizards are living there, which were smuggled. And this gave me inspiration for beginning of the novel. And also I remember that just there at West Fortress, it was Russian military base during Soviet Union, and of course it did not happen there, but then they leave a lot of radioactive garbage, and a lot of people died from it, and my friend's father was one of them. And
was this in Georgia?
In
where
Georgia,
where in
yes.
Georgia was this?
What part?
Yes.
So garbage was everywhere, but
Right.
I settled particular garbage in the basement of fortress. So scientists who followed these lizards get the radiation and slowly died, and it's his father of main
Right.
character.
Okay.
So that's just example how important all this is for me. And being sometimes I have to hide my knowledge about nature because it is boring, you know, and my narrator should be a city boy who has a boring work in office. The story needs this, but I have this nostalgia always to put something, you know, at least crow on the
Yeah,
on the tree.
some sign of
Yes,
nature.
yes, yes.
And which medium do you work in?
Which
medium? Do you work in film? Could you maybe say a little bit about what you're...
I work in film, you know, it's more for fun and living. Fun to act in the films, for living to write the scripts, but both are not very far from my profession, so I like... anyway, Georgian film industry is poor, so I will never get rich, but it's a nice lifestyle, I should say.
And you write scripts?
Yes, I write scripts from the films. Now I just finished first plot before coming here. Now I try to work with young people more than my generation and older young film directors. They are more interesting for me.
And are these young film directors and producers, creatives, are they interested in eco matters?
No, they are doing some gloomy films mostly.
Gloomy films,
yes,
okay.
About
like political gloomy.
No, unfortunately, I would wish to have such a scene, some gloomy, you know, then the character is lost, walking alone on the railway. Something what is called art house now.
Art house, we know that. Thank you. And if maybe now I could move to you, Sion, could you talk a little bit about the same thing, the response? Do you see your own work as literary activism?
It's notoriously difficult to tell writers what to do and what to write and how to write. So the question of saving the planet with writing is not the right question for a writer, because a writer will instantly say, I just write what I need to write, and nobody's going to dictate anything to me. But at the same time, I think all good writers are children of their times. And there is no question of which times we are.
Right.
We are the people who are living at the beginning of the climate emergency. No matter what else happens in history, if there will be a time of looking back, we will be the people who were living at the beginning of this. We will never escape that. So I think any responsible writer has, on one level or another, find a way of dealing with this in what he or she is writing. And it shouldn't be that difficult, because all of our lives are already influenced, and we are already under attack from what is happening on so many levels in society, no matter where we live on the globe. And I think also those who will look back, and let's hope there will be enough people to look back at our times, and there will remain something of what we are creating today for them to look at. They will see how we were impacted by climate emergency in our stories of our everyday lives,
right,
as well as in the stories we write directly about it. But the question is really not writing to save the planet. The question is writing to save man. Because, as we know, there was a long time on this planet without man. And it's possible that there will be a long time again without man on the planet. So the question is really about saving man, saving the human being through writing. And I think it is fair to put those things together, the survival of the humankind and writing, or storytelling.
Storytelling, huh?
Because obviously, from the origin of man, storytelling has been one of our main tools of survival. It's been one of the tools that we have to transform our experience into something a little bit more understandable than just being in the moment.
Right.
And it has been a tool of moving information about survival from generation to generation. The language at its core is poetic, you know,
Yeah.
the poetic mind, the poetic mind, the mind that produces metaphor, is an incredible tool in itself. And it's there. It's there that it's possible that we will find solutions for survival.
It just strikes me as you're talking about survival here, your novella, Blue Fox, it sets up quite early on an idea of survival on both the part of the human and the animal. Could you maybe just link that into what you're saying here?
Yes,
In terms of
the Blue Fox starts with a fox hunt.
Yeah.
And a man is out in the wild trying to catch a fox, an elusive fox, a fox that constantly escapes him, a fox that has the cunning of nature
right.
built into its mind, and it's using all its tricks to try, of course, to survive and not to get killed by man. But at the end of the book, man realizes that nature is always bigger
Yeah.
than he is, that he is not the master of nature,
No.
and he's always at the mercy of nature. And I want to say that I think we are at a time in history where Western literature, because it's so usual that when we talk about writing, when we talk about literature, at least in the part of the world I come from, that we are talking about literature from a Western perspective. We're talking about the novel, we're talking about the poem, as it has been practiced in our cultures. And we are talking from the point of view of a culture that hasn't known oral literature for centuries. And I think that many of the elements we should be looking for when we're looking for solutions that help us survive can be found in indigenous cultures, can
Right.
be found in languages that have still not been explored for their possibilities of metaphor
Right.
and transformation of the human
Yeah.
experience. And it so happens that many of the indigenous cultures that I'm speaking about, they have great systems of thought when it comes to speaking about man and nature.
Which do you have in mind when you...
Just for example, the North American indigenous people,
Right.
both the Native Americans and the people who are living north of the Native Americans, the Inuits, you know, who are living at the edge of the habitable world. We are going into a situation where we are all living at the edge of the habitable world. So who should we look to? We should look to the experts. And that is the indigenous people.
Thank you. Thank you. Shudeep would like
Sean,
to...
yeah, I mean, you're raising some interesting points, of course, and you yourself confess that a lot of the debate that goes on is viewed through the Western lens, white Western lens, almost white male Western lens. We can go statistically and find out, and that's the case. When you say indigenous culture, I squirm in my seat because I come from a place where the society is so ancient and so deeply embedded in history and art. It was one of the first civilizations of the world. So all these things that we have to hear from newfangled Western, loosely educated people is problematic, because who are we talking about? And the other problem is the hypocrisy and the irony. The hypocrisy and the irony is, for instance, the biggest carbon imprint makers are the US, right? They are the ones who are putting sanctions on the smaller countries, but they themselves are still emitting the largest amount of greenhouse gases, are still guilty of all that. So when the so-called powers to be don't practice what they preach, the rest of the world is not going to be taking that very seriously. Also, the solutions of all these have already been done. It's like reinventing the wheel. Let's just face it, the earth, the planet is not in grief. The planet is very happy where it is. Historically, the ice ages happen, many cycles of destructions take place. It's part of an epoch-making geographical concept that happens. You destruct, you reborn. It's the Hindu philosophy of Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu, you know, the creator, preserver, and destroyer. It's part of our cosmic DNA and cycle, not just ours as people. So the planet is going to be okay. It's the selfishness of the I-oriented Western culture which refuses to put the two I's together. Wouldn't it be nice if the two I's can be merged together and say, let's talk about us. Let's talk about we. So moment you make things unipolar, it's bound to self-destruct. It is bound to happen. The irony, of course, is we have this knowledge, but nobody is doing F all about it. You know, and it's really problematic because people like us are privileged people. People like us are armchair activists, and really nothing moves. And ultimately, a writer, a creative writer, is quite powerless. Let's put it this way, because the big corporations and the sort of political machinery that sort of decides all this, you know, puts us in a place where we can do our best. And I'm sure as creative writers we are doing it. For instance, you know, 15 years ago, I was skipping the news channel and I found the president of Kiribati being interviewed on one of the news channels. I just stopped there, and the interviewer was asking this wonderfully elegant gentleman about the economic policies and the educational policies that they need to implement. He just said, I will answer this, but may I just add that my country, Kiribati, is only 6.5 feet above the Pacific. We are a group of 33 atolls. This is 15 years ago. We will be the first country to be underwater. Are you, as a Western journalist, going to house us? We are climate. What are you going to do with all my educated people, and you know whether you're going to take them? So there are lots of moral issues, difficult issues that need to be contended with, and so the hypocrisy is a problem. It's very difficult to take.
I think we are faced with the question what the human being is made of. We know that we are resilient creatures, but we are now witnessing helplessness in a moment where we are possibly facing extinction. And we know what happens to animals when they go through the phases that lead up to extinction. We as humans, we look at them and we ask ourselves, are they not aware? Are they not aware of what is going on? That the group, that the herd is getting smaller, that they are living in, smaller groups spread over a bigger geographical area, and that one day there's not enough of them to survive as species. Now we are faced with this element in ourselves. And of course, one of the things that literature can do is explore what makes us human and try to look for what is wrong or what is missing, or if the solution is hiding there. And I completely agree with you on everything you said about the Western eye in this discussion, and how it of course cannot go on any longer, that people are being spoken to by those who have caused the disaster. But I just want to say that a few years ago, in 2017, I was a guest writer in residence at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Change Impact Research. That is the whole name of it. And there I had, for 6 weeks, I had access to the best scientists in the world who are creating the tools to map what is going on. And it is the institute where they came up with the term tipping point. And this was in 2017, and I went to a lecture on where we are with the tipping points. And of course, it is scary because we are
Really?
reaching all the tipping points much faster than anyone could imagine just the year before that.
Right.
And then it is a question, and I had had sessions with John Schellnhuber, who is the founder of the institute, about the tipping point of man. And I think through writing we can look for the tipping point of man.
Right.
Is there a tipping point in man where man as a creature will react? I don't know.
Would you like to take?
Yeah, you should take it. But I just very quickly to say something. You're talking about extinction of man and so on. There are so many cultures in the world, including mine, where we welcome extinction. It's part of the philosophical cycle of saying, yes, certain things need to end, and it's not a sorrowful act. It's part of a sort of a cycle. So when we load it with negativity and sorrow, then it becomes, I just thought I'll put it out because many in the audience know this already.
No. I understand that, and I know about that, the cycles. But the big difference is that, as I see it, the big difference is that what has up to now been cycles of nature, or the cycles of what is going on in the mythical realm, has been tainted by man, because climate emergency is our Frankenstein looking back at us. That is the big difference with this cycle and the previous, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, please
So,
respond.
no, I have not much to add. Of course, I think and we all feel that the mankind themselves, not only governments, but mankind themselves is not it's not ready to be mankind. I mean, it's not ready to work together, to forget about something. And the pandemic was like a bad rehearsal of all this, and it's an example. Then pandemic starts. Okay, I did not have much illusion, but some people had that now some big trouble came, and this trouble we are sharing, all of us, and maybe it will be the trigger of unification of mankind, and happened just opposite, just opposite, and mankind became more silly after pandemic than it was before this.
Did you write about that at all at the time? Have you written about the pandemic and about this?
If I have written?
Yes.
It's a good question. I have written. Then it just started. First of all, it was interesting time. I have many foreign friends, and I'm always missing him, and I loved writing them letters. And they never have time because in Western Europe, it's more fast.
Go.
And suddenly everyone had a lot of time
to
write the letters, and we were exchanging. And then, and of course, this is also writing, very personal things we were exchanging to each other. And then I got a letter from Berlin Book Festival, and they offered each writer to each country to write a piece about pandemic, very
Okay.
personal stories, and everyone writes, so they got this wonderful collection. I had honor to write, and they could not find any publisher. Everyone told them, "Are you crazy, guys? Who needs
Yeah.
these pandemic horror stories now?" But it's nice to show, to know that they are preserved somewhere, those collections. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so
It
you
was the
wrote-
worst time from lockdown,
Yeah. Okay. And so what did you write? Was it a long piece, a
No,
long
no,
essay?
no, it
or-
was not long. I don't remember everything, but it was Eastern was coming, and the issue was, so Georgian church do not prohibit people to come to the church.
Right.
They
Okay.
could not overstep themselves. And
Okay.
I remember I was sitting on balcony. I remember what I smoking cigarette, and the Eastern come, and I hear the bells, and I knew that all these people will come out when it will, be worse. And then rain starts, and first my reaction was that rain was also toxic.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So you are
The-
imagining. That,
Yes, this
Yeah.
piece I remember from what I have written there.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Thank you.
Welcome.
So just keeping an eye on time, I'm wondering whether we can maybe have one more reading, some concluding thoughts, and then we can open up to the floor. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I was not told that I have to bring translation.
Not at all. And as I understand it, your works are in
Yeah, I had
Georgian, and
some
they have
pieces-
not been
yeah,
translated into.
Yeah.
Have they been translated into other regional languages or
From so-called big languages to German only.
which languages? Sorry. German. Okay, German. Right. Okay. Well, we hope when you come here next time that we'll be able to read you in English, or even in. It would be great to be reading you in Hindi or Malayalam or Kannada or yeah. Okay.
So, since it's a Lit Fest, I thought I'll just bring this whole topic back to literature.
Yeah.
Because that's what we are here for, and how artists and writers deal with this whole idea. So I'll do what I do. My literary activism is through my own writing, and that is the tool. That is, it's done in a quiet way. Poetry is one of those things that you don't write because you want to be famous or you'll make a lot of money. Quite the opposite, in fact. But I've persisted for many decades to do this because, when a poem really impregnates the psyche, it really affects a person. So this particular poem is about the climate change and the toxicology of language. How we as human beings are misusing language. For instance, the Russians spin language to win elections in America, long distance. Cancel culture, the celebration of fake news. We don't know what is virtual and not virtual. We don't know what is real and unreal. So part of it is about the politics of language, this particular poem called Language Itself. And on a personal level, it's a homage to my very first typewriter. It's a manual typewriter. It still works. It's on my desk. I clean it every day. It's almost like my second child. But the problem with a manual typewriter is, and I said this before, that to source the silk red and black ribbon
ribbons,
is
yeah.
more difficult than
Becoming more and more difficult. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, the magic of the analog world has disappeared. So this is called language, and one of the healing processes of literature is through translation, and we haven't talked about it much because that's what seamlessly binds many cultures and sutures things. So language, it has an epigraph from Italo Calvino as an epigraph, and I quote, "Without translation, I would be limited to the borders of my own country. The translator is my most important ally." My typewriter is multilingual, its keys mysteriously calibrating my bipolar, forked tongue. Black red silk ribbon spools unwind as the carriage moves right to left. In cursive hand, I write from left to right. My tongue was born promiscuous, speaking in many languages. My heart spoke another, my head yet another. The translation seamless. Auricles, ventricles pump blood. Corpuscle-like alphabets, phrases, syntax cross-fertilize my text, breathing life. Texture enriched, music, cadence spatially enhanced, osmotic, polyglottal, a polygamy of grammar. Letterforms dance, ligatures pirouette, ascenders, descenders, pitch perfect. Imagination isn't caged in speech. Speech cannot be caged in language.
Thank you. Would you like to read from your work at all? I notice you brought...
Sorry.
Would you like to read from your work at all? Do you have a copy of your work with you?
Yeah, I was thinking about maybe reading here from the Codex 1962 because it ends with the end of man. But
yes, please share. Yeah, that
so
would be great. Yeah.
Here, Icelanders have created an artificial intelligence being called Andreas, and Andreas. Okay. Somewhere during this process, Andreas acquired self-awareness, but concealed the fact from their creators for fear of being disconnected. The key to Andreas' success was that their Icelandic designers had provided the super software with an inbuilt survival instinct. As the software expanded, the intention was gradually to reduce its external power supply, making Andreas responsible for identifying their own energy sources. But Andreas experienced this arrangement as an attack on their existence and concluded that, in common with the animals and the planet's ecosystem, they had one principal enemy, man. Andreas struck without warning. Everything that humans had recorded about themselves was contained in Andreas' databanks, including the ways in which all down the ages they had systematically killed other creatures and especially their own kind. Using blueprints of the world's largest industrial abattoirs and bone meal factories, the Auschwitz extermination camps, and the house of slaves on the island of Gorée, Andreas designed and arranged the construction of extermination and processing plants that went on to slaughter and process over 500 million humans annually. Hundreds of millions more died of hunger and disease until all that remained were those that Andreas, for the moment, required to run the solar power plants that provided their energy. The bone meal was used in fodder and as fertilizer for land and sea. The animals hunted down and killed every last human that sought refuge in the wilderness. Climate change went into reverse.
So finally, man is feeding the earth, literally. Thank you so much. Can you just share again the name of the book? And
the book is called Codex 1962, a trilogy.
And when was this published?
This was published in English. It was published in what does it say here? 2008. 2018.
2018.
So it's available from Scepter in the UK.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us.